And what y'all fixing to see Trump do, most of you wish you was never born.
And thank you for joining us again, folks. Later, one of our power talkers, Professor Leonard Jeffries, Dr. J, will hold another class, this time on the role of economics in the development of civilization and what it means in the era of Donald Trump. Before we get to Dr. J, another one of our power talkers, social activist D.Gregory is here. Greg, welcome back to WL Radio.
God bless. God bless. Peace to you, and thank you for the show, man. So many people got something to listen to. And it drops a lot of that fear. But we in this country is at the same place where the Jews was and the gypsies before it all collapsed. That's what fear do. And if you get somebody on the show one day that understands what fear do to the mind, then you see this, and they can put anything past you. That's what pickpockets do, man. They learn. You always out there listening. You know, pickpockets in the old days was called the soft touch. They got 1,000 muscles in your hands that you don't use. They develop that. So you think they just pickpockets. You looking at Trump and all that and thinking he's just an ordinary. No. Hitler. See, we just hear about Hitler. We hear about the SS troops, but some of you out there heard of the SA troops. That was that elite group of homosexuals that put him in power, and he killed them all. Okay, and that's where this is going, huh? That's where this is going. But because young folks don't know that much about Hitler and all of that and all the stuff, Hitler didn't just arise up. Hitler came to power with 288 votes. That's what you get for voting for the lesser of the evils. And if my mama was alive, I think she knows enough now, because some people will vote for one or the other because they didn't know. But there's a lot of people voted for Hillary because they were scared of Trump. A lot of them jumped for Trump because they were scared of Hillary. Anytime you vote for the lesser of the evils, Carl, you got evil in you. Okay, you can play all the games you want. All them decent folks didn't know they was putting a monster in. You got two monsters. Which one you going to take? You got one guy that rapes a child every 6 weeks, and another rapes one twice a year. So you're going to take the lesser of the evils to take care of your children. And the other thing we got to understand, the church didn't make a kneecap, huh? The church didn't make a toe. The Pope was here last summer. He had sciatica so bad he couldn't hardly walk. So I'm going to let him wash my feet? There's a universal God. That's what happened when they take the pagan religion. The pagan is just like Catholicism, paganism. Then they switched it around. And so all at once now. So let me get back to what you just said about this youngster down there. First, there's a whole lots of people that don't know. And let me say this again now. Ferguson. We all looked at Ferguson. Now, this is something you all can do. You can pull this up. Pull up when he was coming out of that cigar store, and he was pushing that little short guy that was security. Look at the picture. He had on flip-flops and short pants. 15 minutes later, he laying dead in the street with long pants on and Nikes. Now, why you miss it? Because the network's got to be part of it. I'm sitting here, and I can see it, and all them people out there, but when you see it, they telling you. It's like going to a boxing match. They tell you what you see. You go to a football game, they tell you what you see. That's why they can throw games and trick games. They telling you what you seeing, and what you seeing is not what you seeing. And so consequently, when he came out of there, now, the one guy, Johnson, became world-renowned. He had his hands up. He had his hands up. Well, let me tell you something. And I'm telling you this here. I wouldn't tell you if I couldn't let you prove it, because it's so odd, you know. And to protect you who's scared, you think anything of somebody else just putting the truth down. But I learned a long time ago, truth don't have to be validated by ignorance. Okay? It's that simple. I had a mother in the house that told me Santa Claus was a white man and she was buying the toys. That's my mama. But that's what she brought forward and passed on to us. Santa Claus, okay? Santa. Jolly old St. Nick. I've heard that all my life, but nobody explained it until I did my own research. And I found out Mr. Nicholas was probably the wealthiest man in Europe. And during the winter solstice, okay, he gave all his money away. And that's how Mr. Nicholas became St. Nicholas. You got folks ain't never been saints, okay? They made him St. Nicholas. So we put it around, and we almost look at him like Santa Claus helper. And then Santa Claus, where'd he come? He's a chimney sweeper. Back in those days when that was invented, we didn't have fuel. People built houses, but they used wood from trees, and that left soot in the chimney. And that's why Santa Claus go up and sweep the chimney down. That's why they got him coming through the chimney. But there's another system that's in your head that's a chimney there. And I'll get to that in a minute. And so what I'm saying, they put it right out in front of you. Now, and Carl, this is what you ought to do. You have somebody there, have them pull the grand jewelry. And when the grand jewelry came up, hold on one second. Hey, Doc.
All right.
The grand jewelry came out. Now, I went there. I told Martin Luther King, Joe Massey, man, we better get out of here. Something ain't right. Something's not right. Now, I've never seen, long as I've been in demonstration, I've never seen 24-hour demonstrations as a festivity. And then run down, see if that's Christian down there. See. Hear me now. Or have somebody that was there, tell you 24 hours a day, man. They was riding around in their cars with their children with them. Women was walking down the street, pushing their babies. Just festivity. I said, man, I've never seen anything that have affected a group of people like this have. Now, at 8 o'clock, the violence starts. That's not the people. That's them thugs, them provocateurs that come in. Okay? Now, here's what happened, Carl.
Now, we're still in Ferguson, right?
Ferguson. So
right.
Here's what happened. The district attorney that handled the grand jury, he didn't know that there's never no violence till after it get dark, and he picked the time to come to the street and release the grand jury finding. Come on, Carl. I mean, I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm saying, wow, had I not been there, I wouldn't have known. But I was there, and I've never seen such joyous in my life. Mm. And then I'm saying, well, why is he picking this time of night when he could have done it at 12 noon? So now, here's what he said, and you all need to see this. Y'all be talking that yacht talk because you're scared and don't even know you're scared. But look at it for yourself. Nobody have to tell you. And listen what he said. See, when Johnson, his friend, that all the movement got started around the world, he had his hands up. He had, don't shoot. His hands is up. Well, let me tell you who that punk is. And you can look at it. When I saw the FBI put him in witness protection, I said, oh, wait a minute. That's not a federal crime. Why is he in witness protection? What are they protecting? Okay? Now, most people listen don't even know he was in witness protection. Okay? Now, all at once now, when he reads it, and everybody said he was found like even the black folks on the jury. So we so busy calling somebody Uncle Tom and all this. So what? You don't call white folks no names. You get on the show, I hear you talking. Call you to Uncle Tom, so-and-so's Uncle Tom, so-and-so's doing this here. Well, let me tell you. Here's what the DA said. He said, we had a very good authority and a respected black person in the community, Johnson. He told us he was lying. He told that to the grand jury. So y'all sit with your fear. That's how Hitler come to power. You're so busy, and I'm not saying this being mean. I'm saying you so busy and don't know NBC, CBS, all of them is part of the trick, okay? I know that Kennedy didn't die in Dallas, but NBC and CBS don't know it. Here's a man, the most powerful man in the world, shot down. Hold on 1 second.
All right, we're speaking live with D.Gregory. Why don't you finish up?
Let me just tell you how it works real quickly. So, all at once now, I know that King didn't die on the balcony, okay? So I'm that smart. No. Everybody covers it up. Did you ask yourself a question? King is laying on the ground, and 5 people standing there pointing. Well, wait a minute. How'd they know it wasn't going to be another shot?
Right. Hold that thought right there, Greg. We got to check the traffic and the weather in the DMV. I'm sure the folks want to find out what the traffic is, so they're going up to Connecticut Avenue on Northwest. Join us, folks, after the traffic and weather update on AM 1450 and FM 95.9 WOL, where information is power.
And now back to the Carl Nelson Show on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL Radio.
Thanks for staying with us, folks. Our guest is social activist D.Gregory. Let's go back to your story on...
The reason I'm taking you this way, so when I get to what happened... Now, here's what happened in Ferguson. The guy who read the grand jury report, prosecutor, he said he lied. Well, how come I'm the only one heard that? Y'all didn't hear it? And you got to say, wait a minute. Would I lie to you? Would I lie to you? Why? There's no reason to lie to you. But people who do have a reason to lie to you, they'll lie. But all you got to do, I'm telling you something that ran over and over and over and over. Now, how come you haven't heard from Johnson no more? Here's the guy that's what the movement got started for. Black Lives Matter. They came and put millions of dollars behind that movement because of what he said. You know, don't shoot, his hands was up. I know that? No. I got the same eyes that the universal God, not the church, the universal God gave everybody. Queen Elizabeth is the richest woman on the planet, but she don't have no more toes than you. Her fingernails don't grow under the bottom of her feet, huh? Everything, but we get mixed up and talk all the stuff, then they come and manipulate. So let me just finish Ferguson, and then we'll go to the question you asked. So now, Ferguson, have you asked yourself, how come this movement started? Because what he said, you ain't heard nobody. This year passed, last year passed, you haven't heard nobody mention him. They talk about dead ball players that died 50 years ago. But this man, nobody. And if you looked at that movement, there's white folks when they march, and all y'all got to do is check it. When they marched in New York City over that killing, they marched on FDR Drive. That's white folks. They never went to Harlem doing the march, and they haven't gone now. They haven't gone to all them people that's been killed. They went all over the world. They didn't march in Africa. Huh? What do you think that means? See, we're so busy with racism and all of that. You don't see it, okay? So all you got to do is check it out. And so, again, I'm saying, then that night, Johnson's friend, the one that said he had don't shoot, his hands was up, his friend was hanged worse than anything had ever happened in the South. Right 2 blocks from where the rally was, listening to what the grand jury is going to say. 2 blocks. You know how many cops was there? State troopers, federal troopers, because they didn't know if it was going to be a riot or not. And 2 blocks, man. They killed him brutally, put him in a car, set the car on fire the same night. And nobody knew about it. And I'm shocked the Washington Post wrote it and talked about there's never been a lynching that we could describe to equal what happened to his friend that night. Okay? And so, again, I'm saying when you sit there, How come we didn't know that? He's the one that said his hands was up, and yet and still his best friend was killed that night. And all the cops was there, and nobody talked about it. And so again, I'm saying, when you sit and look how they can change stuff. When Trump came up and called Senator from McCain, all you got to do is Google it. McCain is the biggest rat, liar, disappointing point, and everybody. I know it. NBC don't know it. I know it. Presidents don't know it. Let me tell you something. He wrote a book. His daddy was an admiral. He wrote a book. He got shot down in North Korea. Okay, they captured him. Had a broken leg. He made a deal. He said, "If you take me to the hospital where you take your people with money, I tell you everything." This is John McCain. Okay, all right, John McCain. Now, all you got to do is get his book where he apologized to his daddy, and you think about all them people. Now, here's what happened when they was going to bomb Hanoi. You know, the Americans was coming from an aircraft. And everybody was waiting for them to come straight to him. What they would do, they'd come off, make a left, and go 300 miles out of the way, then come back and circle them. McCain was the one that told them how they did it. And that next day, death to American pilots increased 77%. Okay? That punk that sits around and talk all that crazy talk. NBC don't know it. New York Times don't know it. The military people don't know it. And all you got to do is get the book and see where he apologized for what he did. And all of that, he comes back a hero because they covered it up because they got to use him for something. But we can see Trump. Because ain't nobody covering it up. They covering up the real Trump. What they letting you look at is the shadow. Okay, anytime you see Trump in the red tie, that's him. Anytime you see Trump and got another color tie on, that's the clone. But y'all can't even get into that. You know how to cook barbecue ribs? Huh? you know how to make Kool-Aid? But the truth, look in the Bible. See if you see barbecue ribs, Kool-Aid, cocaine, beer. It talks about prayer and fasting and be still and listen. Oh, that's there. When you say your blessing, go look at yourself when you say your blessing tonight when you eat. You pray for everything but the whiskey. Something told you I'm not supposed to drink. You ain't pray. You ain't said no blessing, no Thanksgiving. The Indians taught us Thanksgiving. Abraham Lincoln made it a day of fasting. But the Indians taught us. How many of y'all prayed for Indians? And you folks in Washington, D.C. running around with all that old Indian crap on. All that Indian crap. Let me tell you, millions of black folks ran away from slavery. And they went to the Indian reservation. And the Indians wouldn't let the white folks come in and get them. And yo thanks is running around in some Indian crap. Okay, so let me just say this here. So that's what happened there. St. Louis cops is 1 billion times worse than the cops in Ferguson. You don't know that? After the Ferguson shooting went down, 2 days later, they killed 2 people in St. Louis. Nobody talked about it. And so, again, I'm saying, and so as we work our way now to that trial that's going on now, the unit bomber, all them folks, the bombers and those are the same federal people that come in faking like they just judges. That's so they can't talk. That's so they can't tell you. They go in and say, look, we see to it you won't get the death penalty. We're against the death penalty. So they can't say nothing. They still squabbling now today that we don't think he's fit to, how fit you got to be when you're fixing to get the death penalty. I hope he don't get it. How are you going to be for death penalty for some, but not for another? That's like you're against a black person being lynched, but a white person or a Chinese person, oh, that's different. So all of us is fixing to pay the price for it. And so, again, let's go to San Bernardino, okay? All them people was killed there a week before Christmas. Not 1,000 people, not nobody made a cell phone call. You didn't hear one cop. You didn't hear one ambulance. You didn't see nobody interviewing anybody. Huh? Look at one of the fine names on the planet. I don't know him as a human being. Oh, one of the fine entertainers. Okay, he was killed, and they diverted the plane to a little plane 40 miles out of Chicago. When you're in an airplane call, 400 miles or 40 miles is the same. How come he didn't go 40 miles to the right and land that plane in Chicago? Now, here's this little bitty hospital. Oh, we so busy moaning. Oh, he was in the hospital. You know what I'm saying? One newspaper man, person, woman, come in from around the world and interview people in that hospital or show you a picture of that hospital where they had Prince. You saw him the night before in Atlanta, that one-man show. He did two of them. Did he look tired? Did he look sick? And then all at once, the next thing we hear, he's on a charter plane. But what they didn't tell you, who is the charter plane owned by? Huh? Warren Buffett. Huh? That was his plane, okay? But he goes around as define this, define ain't nothing but a piece of dog, okay? Doo-doo, okay? Now, are we dumb enough to believe those big, powerful planes that they said hit the World Trade Building? Are we stupid enough to be some little punks, huh? Little punks. All they got to do is say Arab, and you already, that's like you say, black person, and you ain't even supposed to get a fair thought. They hit, look, Carl, if you in that plane and you flying it, and that plane's going over 700 miles an hour, the World Trade Building look like a toothpick to you, okay? That's what it looks like, okay? Now, you tell me they all hit them bill on the first strike, and then somebody said, well, how'd they learn how to? Oh, they didn't. They just learned how to use the simulators. Okay, well, let me see where they went to Florida, huh? The simulator place where they teach pilots how to fly. Who's that owned by? Warren Buffett. Okay. I don't expect you to know this. I don't expect you to know it at all. I know it, but NBC don't know it.
Oh, hold on a second, Greg. We got to take a quick break here.
And now back to the Carl Nelson Show on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL Radio.
And thanks for staying with us, folks. We're going to get back to D.Gregory, but then we're going to talk about Dylan Roof.
Okay, here we go.
Because, Greg, I know you got it. I don't want you to miss your show. Be late for your show today.
No. Let's talk about it. And I wish you had somebody sitting next to you that could Google so they could see. That church is where Juneteenth was invented, huh? That church celebrated June the 15th, 16th, and 17th. That little punk white boy that have no education drove 100 and some miles, and nobody asked, how did you know this was the church where Juneteenth was invented? Starts on the 15th, ends on the 17th. You did the shooting on the 17th, okay? How do you know that? And how come ain't nobody talking about it, huh? Now, watch this now. He goes in. Any of y'all out there ever been to a black church? You go with a friend, but you a stranger. I dare you to get close to that preacher. Here's a white boy sitting next to him, and nobody's thought anything was wrong with that. He walks in and he says to a black woman, and it went all over the world, don't worry, I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to leave you to tell the world what happened. What? Well, you crazy. Most folks leave a note, huh? Most folks leave a note. I'm going to leave. So he reloaded 5 times, and she's still there. Huh? Now, I don't know what kind of black woman she was. I've been around black women all my life. And you're going to sit down in a circle and kill folks, and she didn't run? Can I tell you something else you need to Google, Carl?
What's that?
It was a black woman. Went all over the world. She said, I told my grandson, 6 years old, to play dead. You remember that story?
Yes.
Okay. Did you know she was killed, the black woman?
She was killed.
The woman who told the world.
Right.
At the church, the woman.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I told my grandson to play dead. She was killed. Nobody asked the question, well, who told about her she was killed? The 6-year-old had a press conference? Huh? You ever been around a child and all that shooting and screaming is going on, and you think that child going to play dead? See, that's what fear do. Okay? You defy gravity. To this day, nobody has said, how did that get around the world? Okay? And so what I'm saying is when you sit and look, you look at what happened in Baltimore. I'll get right back. Where the black woman came out and was whooping her child. Hey, do you understand motherhood? If the black child steal your car and the car hit a tree and it's on fire, you ain't going to go there and whoop him. You're going to get him safe. In the middle of the ride, she's whooping him. And nobody said, wait a minute, hold it. And she's on Time magazine, and then somebody found out something. Oh, they thought she was going to be the woman of the year. And they found out what really went down. You ain't heard no more about it. So if you go there and watch what's there in that church. Now, he came into the parking lot, parked the car. Okay? Oh, wait a minute. That church had, how come we had never seen the cameras of him pulling in? Huh? How come we had never seen it? How come NBC and none of them have asked for the car as it pulls in? So he goes in, has a conversation, sit down, everybody's there, and all they want to. So I call a newspaper down there, a black one. I said, hey, Dr. D.Gregory, yes, it's an awful thing here. I said, well, let me ask you something. What time did you hear about it? He said, oh, about 11 o'clock. I said, you know how early that was? I said, I mean, are you all black paper because you can't afford to wire stuff? He said, the white papers didn't hear about it till the same time. Oh? Oh? Are you serious? So this is what's there. I don't expect you to know it. Carl, if you're a brain surgeon, I don't expect me to come and talk to you about brain surgery, but there's simple stuff. I noticed you didn't wash your hands before you performed the operation. Okay? I noticed you didn't do this, huh? And so what I'm saying is that when you stop, they got everybody talking about the black neurosurgeon that ran for president. He ran 9 months and never mentioned that what he pulled off had never happened in the history of the planet. They had separated Siamese twins, but never the head ones, huh? Never the head ones had they separated. He wasn't even in the room when that happened, okay? Wasn't even in the room when that happened.
You're talking about Ben Carson.
Yeah, he wasn't even in the room. And just to cut it short so we get back, here's a man that pulled off something that had never been pulled off in the history. He's never been nominated for a Nobel Prize. If you nominated for Radio Show of the Year, it's 10 other people that's nominated with you. He had never been nominated. We're not talking about got a Nobel Prize for medicine, huh? It never happened. What happened was a team of Germans, 87 of them, had been doing those operations and failing. They said, look like we got it straight now. We need one more. And that's when they pulled this guy. Somebody Google the operation that happened. That guy was kidnapped from South Africa, a black man. So it wouldn't look like it's a racist thing. Okay? They get a black man in there, a brother. Okay? And so everything is cool. And then he got so crazy when he went to President Obama's prayer vigil. You remember when he said Obamacare is worse than slavery, Carl?
Right.
Did you know when he got back to Johns Hopkins, he was fired? Fired. They'd already paid him to do the commencement address at Johns Hopkins. They said, keep the money, just pack your stuff and get out of here. Okay, so this is what it is. This is white folks' business. And you bring a white person on and see if you can find one quickly and know how to cook chitlins, okay? That's our business, huh? They're talking about you got rhythm. What kind of rhythm? Blues? Do you know what it's like if you got a son, ABCs, kept repeating ABCs, and all at once he learned it, And next time I see you and him, you putting him in college, huh? Well, wait a minute, Carl. ABC, you sang the blues when you 9 years old. My baby done left me. The blues, the blues, the blues. Blue Monday. I wonder how many people get killed or something happened bad on Monday. You've been singing Blue Monday. What makes that Monday blue? And so, again, we go back to what happened there. And so all at once now, when the black press guy called me, I called him, and then found out, well, we didn't hear nothing about this here. I said, you mean something, the biggest story in the world, and might be the biggest story this year, and y'all there, and the news didn't break till 11:30? Did anybody see? Carl, I was in L.A. the other day. A Google car picked me up, and they said, I heard you saying something about 9 months ago, where you said all them people in the building celebrating, nobody made a cell phone call. He said, well, I was working right down the street at a car, selling cars, and the FBI and federal agents came in and showed us a picture of 3 men dressed in army fatigues and said, this is who we looking for. And then when it come out, it's a man and his wife, okay? And so again, when you put the aura out there, people come to you. And they tell you things, and they can't trick me, because all I got to do is pick up the phone. I mean, when Malaysian Airlines disappeared, you're all crazy. Talk about these children with their pants below their butts. But you believe with all that hardware that's why Trump is crazy as he is. He knows something happened to Kennedy. He don't know no more than I know. He don't know no more than the NAACP, than the NBC and them, but they ain't going to tell it, okay? All you got to do is ask the question. When somebody listening, say, well, wait a minute. When John McCain wrote the book, I got the book. You mean Trump didn't bring the book to show it? Oh, that's part of the game. Oh, that's part of the game, Carl. They spend trillions of dollars. What we going through now started being legislated under Harry Truman. And when that little thug punk, our new president, when he said so-and-so is lying, politics have never been, all you got to do is go back to 1948 when the headline said, Harry Truman lost to Dewey, and then 12 o'clock that morning, the headline changed. He won in Chicago. Okay, so this is what I'm saying. I'm not a prophet. I sound like a prophet because when I ran for president in 1968, Wall Street Journal, November the 7th, that's 3 days from the Tuesday, which was Friday. No other paper ran what I'm fixing to tell you now. All the computers were shut down at midnight because it showed D.Gregory, the presumptive elected president of the United States. Why? Because the computer spit out that D.Gregory got 9 million votes in the state of Pennsylvania, not all over America, 9 million votes in the state of Pennsylvania. And once them numbers came, they couldn't stop it, so they had to shut the count down.
Right.
Okay?
Greg, we got to let you go because I don't want you to be late, and we got to take a break. So this is a good time to let you go. Because you know what the traffic is like going out there.
Huh?
Yeah, because you got to fight that traffic going out to Connecticut Avenue at Northwest.
Okay, we'll come back on and I'll run the whole piece down.
Yeah, when you finish the show, we'll come back and deal with it.
Thank you for one more thing before I leave. Kathy Hughes.
All right, hold that thought because we got to take the break here. They tell me we got 10 seconds right here on AM 1450 and FM 95.9 WOL, where information is power.
And now back to the Carl Nelson Show on Washington, D.C.'s 1450. 1450 WOL Radio.
And thanks for staying with us, folks. Just want to remind you, coming up at the top of the hour, we're going to be joined by Professor Leonard Jeffries. We're going to talk about the role of economics in the development of civilization and what it means in the era of Donald Trump. We're with D.Gregory, and he's got a date. Freddie just told me to make sure that you're on time. I'm going to be blamed if you don't make it over to the Improv on Connecticut Avenue Northwest by 6 o'clock. That's showtime. But the show is sold out. I'm telling you this, folks, so don't try to get over there because the no more tickets have been sold out for months. But Greg's going to be in the district next month with Paul Mooney. We'll tell you more about that. Greg, you wanted to say something before you leave?
I was saying about Kathy. I worked with Kathy, and that's when my life changed. You know, people hear you, and they say, wow, listen to Carl. They don't know how many years you put into this. They don't know the rhythm. I learned the rhythm, not from being a comic. That rhythm don't work when you're talking about discovering things. And so me and Kathy sit there, what a genius. I'd read papers. You've been around me. I get every paper I can find. Kathy just sits there and come out of her spirit. So it was on a Friday night. We on from 6 to 10. So I said, Kathy, do Princess Di owe you any money? She said, what you talking about? I said, just what I asked you. Do she owe you any money? Just like you got to go to commercial. We was finishing a show. She said, what are you talking about? I said, well, if she owe you. No, I said, if the wench owe you any money, you better get it tonight because she'll be dead by the end of the week. They killed her the next day. Huh? They killed her the next day. Huh? I know that. NBC don't know it. Huh? CBS don't know it. But I know it. If you're stupid enough to believe that. And so when you stop and think about it, the last question I'm going to ask you ever heard the word tall, dark, and handsome called?
Yes, I've heard that phrase.
You ever heard him called Sidney Poitier tall, dark, and handsome? You ever heard him called Harry Belafonte tall, dark, and handsome?
No, not to those brothers.
That's a phrase that they use for white men that they know is passing. Clark Gable, Rudolph Valentino. That's why you never heard it. So this is what this is about. And so again, I say, here's y'all's homework. The killing happened on the 17th of June. And I just want you to Google this. Google 2 days later, on the 19th of June, in South Carolina, $29 million was fast-tracked to give to the victims' kinfolks. Did you hear that before? Did you hear that? It's $3.2 million per family? Huh? And nobody knows about it but a handful of people. All you got to do is Google it. 2 days after the shooting. You know how long it takes to go? This was the Justice Department fast-tracked $29 million to pay the victims of the family. Okay? So that's all I'm saying. It happens every day. Every day. And what y'all fixing to see Trump do, most of you wish you was never born. Okay? That's what's fixing to happen, and you can't feel it. You can't see it. But if me and Carl applied for a job collecting garbage, the first thing we get, they're going to ask us to bring in our tax return. Here's a man running for president of the United States, and he don't need no tax return. Instead of y'all saying, wait, that's impossible. Hey, wait a minute. And so, again, I just thank you, Carl. I thank what you put out. And tell Brother Jeffrey, he took my 2 babies to Africa. Him and his wife. I was so embarrassed. I'm the blackest thing on the planet, giving $1 million to the movement. And I told my 2 oldest, y'all going to Africa. You know what Dick Gregory's children told him? We don't want to go to Africa. They'll eat us. I said, what'd you say? They'll eat us. Now, all you got to do is be clever. I said, okay. My wife was upset. You couldn't believe that was coming out of a Gregory. I said, well, y'all don't have to go to Africa, but you're never going to go back to Disneyland again. And so they went to Africa. Ask Leonard, he'll tell you, Jeffrey. They went to Africa with Leonard Jeffrey, his wife, and a group so they could go back to Disneyland. And after they went to Africa, they never wanted to go back to Disneyland.
Wow, what a story. Yes, what a story. Greg, be safe out there now because I don't want you speeding out there getting up Connecticut Avenue.
No. Won't even happen. I know the shortcut.
Okay, yeah, because you heard what the traffic was like. It's just crazy out there.
Thank you, babe. Bye-bye.
All right, that's D.Gregory, and he's going to be at the, he's traveling right now, going over to the Improv. But here's what we wanted to talk about. We want to talk about Dylan Roof. What are your thoughts? He was convicted of the murders of the Charleston Nine. Is he a stone-cold racist or crazy or both? Those of you know a little bit about the prisons and the prison gangs, they're all, different areas of the prison. He'll be like a martyr in there with the white nationalists, the Aryan Nation. They got their own gangs in the prison. What are your thoughts? 800-450-7876. Let's go to Daniel on line 1, comes from Philadelphia. Daniel, you think this guy's crazy or you think he's just a cold racist?
Well, it really makes no difference whether he's crazy, whether he's a cold racist. He's probably both. But to tell you the truth, the real punishment for him would be 23 hours, 24-hour lockdown, 23 hours in solitary, nothing in there with you. You just in that room by yourself, 23 hours a day.
For how long?
They only let you out for an hour, and then
for how long? For how long, Daniel?
I mean, for life.
Mm.
You know what? What do people say when people die? They comfort you. They say, well, they're at peace now. Their troubles are over. Their problems are over. You kill him, that's a break. You're giving him a break. If you put him in population, you're right. The Aryans will love him and protect him. But you put him in 23-hour solitary confinement, 23 hours a day in a cell with nothing in there but just you, that's a nightmare. And you're 20-some years old, so you got 50 years of that. And then only out 1 hour a day. And to make sure that the guards are black that are watching. So the only people he's going to see for the rest of his life is black people in the cell.
Let me ask you this, because this is what he said today. Well, it was released what he said today, because I think he wrote this and they just announced it in the courtroom. He says it's not fair for him that he has to hear so much from the loved ones of his victims, because that what went down during the trial. This is the sentencing phase now. When you heard that, did that make you angry that he said it's not fair for him to hear so much from the loved ones talk about the victims that he killed?
Slim is just twisted. That's the bottom line. Really you got to be concerned with how many more twisted people are like him out here.
There's quite a few. He's getting applause now. If you read some of these reports, people. Yes. And this is before Donald Trump burst on the scene. So he's getting quite a bit of applause. And he himself says he's not crazy.
Well, you know what, though? The bottom line is that's good. You're not crazy, but we're not going to kill you because that's the easy way out. And we're not even going to put you in prison population. I'm telling you, Carl, how would you feel being in a cell, nothing to do, no books, nothing, just you in that cell, 23 hours, 23-hour stretches. You're out for an hour. You don't see anybody. You're not interacting with anybody. And then you're back in that thing again. And you're like that for 50 years. He's 22 years old.
Daniel, I think this guy may be able to do that, man. Well,
what? Let me tell you something. He is not inhuman. I don't care who you are. No one is comfortable with a 23-hour. You're a human being.
But how can you say that? Here's a guy who walked into a church. They handed him a Bible and they talked a little bit scripture, and then he blows them away. And you think that you just locking him up in a room is going to be cool?
I mean, this guy obviously thinks he's a soldier in the army of racism. And, when the military drafts you, you may not have ever pulled a trigger in your life. You may not have killed a fly. But when they put you in combat, I know some people that have done a lot of killing when they weren't killers in the first place. So, it's all relative. He thinks he's some kind of soldier in a fight for white supremacy. But my issue is, again, I would not put him in prison pop. I would not execute. I give him the most of it. I had another philosophy about punishment. I don't know why when you have people who commit heinous crimes, why doesn't science just take that individual and you have diseases, inject that sucker with the disease, and then try to cure it. If you don't cure it, then he's dead, and everybody knows mad.
So you're saying use him as an experiment.
And if you do cure it, then you move on to the next disease. You just say, why waste research on mice and animals when you don't know? When you've got people who committed heinous crimes, perfectly good body, experiment with them. He's committed a heinous crime. The only thing you could do to even minutely try to repay anything is your body, you become a human guinea pig. All it's either one of those. You're a human guinea pig and or you are spending solitary confinement.
All right, I'll tell you what, Daniel, because we got some other folks who want to get on. So I want to find out if anybody agrees with you. I thank you for your call. Daniel calling us from Philadelphia. Let's go to line 2. Warren J. in Maryland. Warren J., do you agree with what Daniel just said?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, I've been watching this. Well, not watching because they haven't broadcast it, but I've been following this Dylan Roof Storm trial, and this is the trial of the century, and it's not on television.
And there's a reason why it's not on television, but go ahead.
Yeah, and it's the shame because, again, if you read what he has said, he's actually a reflection of the bigger society. What he said today, allegedly, that, it's not fair, that he should have to hear the voices of the victim, that's the same thing white folks tell black folks all the time when we try to bring up discrimination, racism, white supremacy. The same thing. It's a microcosm of the bigger picture. We are missing an opportunity of a lifetime to hold America accountable. But because of these distractions, we're missing an opportunity right now, Carl. Just missing one.
So what do you think? Do you think he's crazy, or do you think he's just a stone-cold racist, hater?
Brother, for real, I think it's genetic. See, we're trying to make it about him. But he's a 22-year-old prodigy of the biggest society. Look, America is on trial. Because he said 3 things. They are killing our people. They are raping our women. Okay? They're taking our job, taking our land.
All right, hang on a second, Warren. We got to take this quick break here. We're closing on the top of the hour. I'll let you finish on the other side, right here on AM 1450 and FM 95.9 WOL, where information is power.
Welcome to the Carl Nelson Show on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL Radio and live around the world on WOLDCnews.com.
Thanks for joining us, folks. Momentarily, we're going to be talking to Dr. Leonard Jeffries on another classroom discussion about economics. We're talking about Dylan Roof, the convicted killer of the Charleston Nine. I want to find out your thoughts. Is he a stone-cold racist, crazy, both? Warren, I'll let you finish up what you were saying before we left for the break.
God, I forgot what I was saying, but what I would say is this in my conclusion. If Dr. Frances Cress was alive, she would highlight, trust me, that this is the African and American 911. This is our 911. This is our 21st century 911. And we have let this slip away because we have allowed America to dictate what to see and what not to see. Had that been a black child, a black young man, shoot up a church with 9 white people in it, you would see this trial on rotation every day for the rest of the year.
All right. Thanks, Warren. We're going to keep moving. I thank you for your call. 800-450-7876. Abdul's joined us on line 3. Abdul, your thoughts. You agree with it, what folks have said so far?
Well, I really don't think he needs the death penalty, because I think that, he needs to, get life without the possibility of parole. And 2 things that we know very clearly in terms of this prison system. If they put him in prison, they're going to put him in isolation. He's going to be in a situation where they think that he can be protected. But the same thing they did with Dahmer. They thought that Dahmer was protected, and that brother busted him upside the head with that mop wringer. You know what I mean? And, and took him out of his misery. So, I think that he needs to suffer the same way. If this is a real situation and these people really were murdered, you know what I mean, that, he needs life in prison. You know what I mean? Because life imprisonment is a monster, partner. When you're behind them walls and you can't go nowhere and you can't do nothing, you don't have no access at nothing, and you're going to be there the rest of your life. You know, and I'm certain that, you know what I mean, I don't care how strong the Aryan Brotherhood is. I really don't. I mean, they ain't that tough. Believe me. The strongest groups that have ever been in them institutions when they were organized were brothers. But, you know what I mean, somebody will take him out of his misery. You know what I mean?
The fundamental question, though, Abdul, you think he's crazy or he's sane or he's just playing all of us?
No, I mean, he's sane. I mean, he's doing, you understand, saying what has been a consistent part of this American landscape forever. You know, they have never had any direct or indirect respect for us. You know, one of the things that you said that Dr. Francis West Wilson says constantly is that most black people are trying to just get a better seat in the system of white supremacy. They're not trying to fight it. They're not trying to change the dynamics of it. You know what I mean? You look at what happened after the murder. I mean, people went and prayed. Come on, man. You went and prayed and you forgive this man, you understand what I'm saying, and your loved ones just died. Naeem Akbar makes a unique comment. Naeem said, you know what I mean, I ain't forgiving nobody. Let God do the forgiving. You know what I mean? I'm looking for revenge for mine. You know,
wow.
these, you know, I mean, and the reality is if we keep functioning from this perspective, they're going to keep doing what they want to do. You know?
Well, let me ask you this then, because I know we got to go to Dr. J in a moment, but do you think this forgiveness is part of our DNA? Is it what do we? Is it the biblical? It's the Christian folks, or the spiritual, religious people side of us, or what is it? If this forgiveness, because it seems like we keep on doing that all the time.
I think we were trained to do that. I mean, you look at the dynamics, you know what I mean, of what we've come up under. I mean, you had the Faith Brothers on yesterday, and each and every time that a question came, they tried to justify it through faith, you know. But we've had faith in a whole bunch of stuff. We had faith that slavery would end, but it's never ended. You know what I mean? And you tell me that there's a creator of all things, you understand, saying that oversees this whole process, and he allowed men, women, and children to die wholesale, not just in slavery, but we look at the unjust wars that have taken place.
Right. Abdul, let me jump in here again and ask you this then. Is that our downfall? Because we believing that somebody's going to magically come and save us. Someone is going to be there, or if we be good, we're going to get to a place where everything's cool and we'll get our revenge there. You think that's in our psyche? That's why we keep making these mistakes, and they taking advantage of us.
Yeah, because we've technically been trained to be weak, and that weakness is, you know what I mean, that if you continue to talk about Jesus coming back, you know what I mean, to save us. And we've been waiting all this time, and nobody's come back to ever save us. That at some point we got to wake up. And our biggest weakness is that belief in that mystery God in terms of the issue of forgiveness. And we say that forgiveness is for the victim, or excuse me, for the victim of the crime, that eases the soul. Retribution eases the soul too. I mean, Europeans show you that every day. You know,
right.
So, you know, at the end of
Thanks, Abdul. We got to go because Dr. J's been holding for a while. Dr. J, welcome back to WOL Radio.
Well, certainly, Carl Nelson, it's a pleasure to join you and your radio family, but I don't know why you cut the brother off. He was on a roll, and I was taking some notes. And I just got in.
All right. I was going to ask you to comment on what he said.
Well, the thing is, all of us will have our analysis. All of us will have reached our conclusions. All of us have to make a decision on what we want to do. That's an individual decision. That's not a collective decision. And so he was expressing sincerely his collective decision, his individual decision, which impacts on us collectively. So we need to have some serious discussions on all of this. So this opens up the question of what kind of socialization have we had? And then what kind of acculturation has that produced? Now, I'm not talking big-time talk. Socialization is how you get your beliefs, your role models, your patterns of behavior, how you become who and what you are. That's a part of what I call formation. And then the society, and that comes mainly from the family as a beginning, and then it spreads into the larger society. Acculturation is how you fit into society. What are your values? What are your beliefs, etc.? And the society has all types of institutions that socialize you and acculturate you to it. So what societies have we been acculturated and socialized to? These are the societies produced by slavery and colonialism. And so we have to understand why we are where we are and whose we are in terms of our thinking and whatnot. And then we have to have a collective decision that many of us got to make a move. You can make it individually, it's going to have no impact. You can make it collectively, it would have a big impact. And so, but we have to discuss this question. And we can't say, well, the Protestants this and the Catholics that, or the Muslims this and the Muslims that. All of those traditions about what life is and what the world is and what the dynamics of the world is all about are the great mysteries. We don't have any real understanding of all of this. So in order to understand the great mysteries of what life is and where do you fit and how do we fit as a family and how do we fit in the global context of the universe, people have had to come up with some kind of possibilities. So what we've been processed into is part of the larger question of trying to solve these mysteries. What is life? And what is it? Is death? And how do you fit into society? So we need an African cultural understanding of life. We need an African economic system on how our wealth is produced and used. We need an African political system that controls that wealth and puts in place the space that we can do what we need to do for ourselves. But first and foremost, if you ain't got your mind, you can't determine where your behind is going to be going. They got our mind. They still got it. Even the most revolutionary haven't been able to shake that mind control. Even the most committed and concerned, even the most religious haven't been able to shake that mind control. So we got some things to do. And so as we start this new year, I like to shift things around and put a Ra in that new year and turn that year into era, a new era. We need a new beginning for African peoples to say we want our mind. We have to find our mind, free our mind, Africanize them. I ain't African. I'm from Alabama. I ain't African. I'm from Jamaica. I ain't African. I'm from the Dominican Republic or Brazil. Our mind. Wade Noble said it best. African peoples everywhere have a shattered consciousness and a fractured identity. And it didn't happen by happenstance. It's part of the programming to keep you in control at whatever historical period you're talking about, at whatever level of understanding you're referring to. Mind control is the key. And that's why they have come at so many of us who have attempted to look for a liberation of the mind. They said, no, crush that right now. Don't even let that light flicker. Because if it becomes a flame and black folks realize that the key is control of the mind, they will be free.
All right, hold that thought right there, Doc. We got to take a quick break right here. Got to check the traffic and weather in the DMV areas. D.Gregory just told us it's starting to snow a little bit. 800-450-7876. Class is in session with our guest, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. We'll take your calls next on AM 1450 and FM 95.9. WOL, where information is power.
And now back to the Carl Nelson Show on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL Radio.
And thanks for staying with us, folks. So we've got one of our griots with us, Professor Leonard Jeffries, Dr. Jeffries. And we're going to talk about economics, but this topic, and thanks Ahmed for pushing it out a little bit further, and also Brother Abdul out of L.A. Why are we so forgiving? And this all came out of what's going on with Dylan Roof, the Charleston Nine. He got convicted of killing the Charleston Nine, and you all saw it. You know, the victim, the families of the victims, they're all apologizing and feeling sorry, and they're going to pray for him. So I want to find out, where does that forgiveness come from? Other folks are not forgiving. The other people, they don't forgive. So, Dr. J, help us out, and because you say they've got our mind, so how do we free our mind?
Well, that's where our mission should be primarily focused on. Freeing our mind from the constraints. We're under, not only have we been the product of a physical enslavement, but we've been the product of a mental enslavement and a spiritual enslavement. And so we have to look at the whole picture and begin to put our plans in place. Because if you have a plan, you have a possibility of changing something. If you don't have a plan and you're under somebody else's plan program, then there's very little that you can change. It may change by happenstance, but it won't change because you've actually directed it. And so we need to look at our history and do an analysis. And that analysis has to be what I refer to as a systems analysis. You have to understand that the key to understanding what life is all about and where it's going to go and what it can possibly be in terms of its productivity is you've got to have a systems analysis. Our great brother D.Gregory, he's used his comedic prowess to become a commentator on life. But at one point, Dick was a runner. He'd be running 26 miles. But you just don't get up and run 26 miles. You got to have a plan. You have to have the 3 Ps. You have to have a plan, and you have to have preparation, and then you have to be ready for all of the possibilities you're gonna run into. So we're just living life, trying to survive. We're at the level of survival culture. We don't have a plan. We don't have the preparation, and we don't understand what are going to be the possibilities, negative and positive. So we've got to change all of that. And then we could begin to feel what Malcolm felt after he had his prison experience and he met the tradition of the Nation of Islam that helped him liberate himself from the enslavement of his ancestors. And then he took into his life another socialization that came out of what was the plan of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And then Malcolm went even more revolutionary than that plan. And then he concluded that we need to free ourselves by any means necessary, not just by a Bible, a Torah, or a Quran, any means necessary. So we need to study these brothers and sisters who have been tackling this system of domination, destruction, and death, which we call white supremacy, which we call the American way. And here's a man yelling and screaming. He wants to be the president of the United States, and he's saying, we need to make America great again. In other words, we need to get the slave system working a little better, maybe working it like it did for hundreds of years, where we had people caught up in a situation where they are the mothers and fathers of human development and culture, but we had them in a vice in which we were saying they weren't even human. And we've had them in that vice for hundreds of years. Now our people, by various means necessary, have been striking a blow for liberation. And then when we do move in that direction, here they come again with another part of their system, another technology controlling the internet and controlling the airwaves and the Facebooks and we're quitting and treating and doing and deating and whatever. However, I believe that we're on a victorious path when we move from being not even human in the context of the European world, and unfortunately in the context of others, including some Arab cultures. when we have moved from that to where we are beginning to see a possibility of what we can do when we control our minds. And when we control our minds, you can control the behind. And so we are in the process where we've got to not worry about Black Lives Matter. All lives matter. But if you don't understand what Black lives have been subject to, then you can't even come up with your strategy or your plan. Our brother from Mississippi, Amos Wilson, made it through the miseducation of Mississippi, had his mind and heart, mind, body, and spirit intact. He made it through Georgia and the Morehouse processing of being achieving Negro. And then he came up to New York big time in the Big Apple. And he was faced with an education in the Catholic system. And so he survived the Jesuit mind control. He survived the mind control of the Negro of the South, which was to show that you got a place in the society and it's at the bottom. He was able to survive the success syndrome of the Negro that Morehouse and our other institutions have in place. And he went beyond that. And then he got into the Jesuit system, and he did not become a Clarence Thomas. He began to see the revolutionary possibilities of mental liberation. And so he laid out a blueprint. You got to study an Amos Wilson. Oh, well, I heard a tape. Tape don't mean a damn thing that introduces you to him. You have to study his whole school of knowledge. Study his biogenetics, his foundation, what his ancestors left him in the way of the entitlements he could call upon to build a world for himself. And then that's what his mother and father combined to give him as his operation base. But in order to put a plan and work it, you have to have formation to complement the foundation. And if you have a formation that is based upon a systems analysis and understanding of your potential and your possibilities, and instead of your degradation and your dehumanization, that formation will lead you to what the Amos Wilsons of the world have become, leaders in this destroying this thought control. And then you have on the female side of the equation a similar family situation with our great Queen Mother. Here she was, coming from a family in Chicago area of doctors. So her biogenetics is sound. Her foundation is sound. That's Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. You just don't start with her working with Neely Fuller and the work that and the direction he gave her. Go to her root. What did she have going for her? A foundation of people that came out of the struggle of black folk and were medical doctors. And a socialization. When I awarded her a prize at the Howard University Founders Library a couple of years ago, she came by herself, so proud, walking on that campus to receive this honor. And we didn't realize how important it was to her to walk into Founders Library and see us there ready to honor these greats. And then the award that we were giving her was the Ida B. Wells Award. She said, "You don't know what you've touched in me." I said, "What do you mean, Queen Mother Frances?" She said, "I grew up with the Ida B. Wells family. I went to school with the children. My parents knew Ida B. Wells." So you're talking about Ida B. Wells, who, like Harriet Tubman, said, "I'm going to find my way of liberating and going against one of their biggest institutions of terrorism, which was lynching." Ida B. Wells led a personal crusade against lynching in America. That's the formation that Frances Cress Welsing comes out of. That's the socialization that she comes out of. You need to study the Frances B. Wells School of Understanding and Struggle, but you can't just start with her great mentor and partner, Neely Fuller. Study her life, how she responded. When I see her, the first thing that pops into my mind is this tall queen standing up at the Black Power Conference in North New Jersey in 1967, and we were all there looking for a way out of no way with the explosions of the cities, Watts in 65 and New York in 64 and several other cities after that and many cities after that. We were in the Black Power Conference trying to decide where to go, what to do. Adam Clayton Powell was there, Percy Sutton was there, other great leaders were there. Then the sister, in the midst of this crowd looking for a way, jumped up and said, we're not doing the right thing. We're not exhibiting our power and our powers. We need to go down to the jailhouse and get our brothers and sisters out of there. I said to myself, oh, my God, I grew up with these folks in North New Jersey or in the police department. A lot of them are the Italians and other ethnic groups that don't like black folks. And Francis is jumping up and saying, leave this place and go down and get those people out. That's what Queen mothers do. They lead their people. They help direct their people. So she was in the best tradition of Queen Nzinga, best tradition of Yaa Asantewaa, who challenged the Asante men to stand up. And if the men don't stand up, us women will take on the torch. Well, that's just about what Francis was saying. But luckily, this was not the right time to do that. But nobody was going to stop this tall, beautiful, fully afroed sister speaking her special truth. But there was one brother in the audience, and it wasn't Percy Sutton. It wasn't Adam Clayton Powell. It wasn't any of the great leaders. It was Brother Omar. Omar, who was a partner of Malcolm X. And Omar was able to take control of the moment and express to her what we needed to do and why we needed to do it and when we needed to do it. And the sister wasn't quite satisfied, but she realized that this was not the time for us to run out of the Military Park Hotel or the Robert Treat Hotel in the heart of Newark down to the jail because the police was ready for us.
Hold that thought right there, Dr. J. We got to take a quick break here. I'll let you finish on the other side. And we got some folks who want to speak to you. Class is in session. Reach out to us on AM 1450 and FM 95.9 WOL, where information is power.
Back to the Carl Nelson Show on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL Radio.
And thanks for staying with us. Our guest is Professor Leonard Jeffries. It's time to free your mind. The class is in session. You want to ask a question to Dr. J, just raise your hand by dialing 800-450-7876. We're trying to free your mind, folks. That's what we're working on today with Dr. J. So, Dr. J, I'm going to let you finish up what you were saying before we take some calls for you.
Yes, I was saying that we need to go deep in our understanding, go deep in our analysis. And when we take a beautiful sister who is going to be with us forever in terms of her mission, which was to lay something strong on us about systems, that Frances Cress Welsing will speak to us forever. And it's not just a text that she wrote or the great ISIS papers, a book that she published, but her messages were clear and consistent from when I met her in 1967 to our engagement over the years until she left to join the ancestors. So study her life, study how she handled challenges. Just don't be satisfied with a tape. And then don't pin her down at a certain period of time where she was a heavy Christian. She went beyond that. Or don't pin her down when she was an academic fitting into the medical teaching at Howard University. She was pushed out of Howard, but she survived that. And so don't link her to one period of time and then say that's her whole life. Look at her whole experience, her roots from her family, her biogenetics, what she inherited, and what she did with that. And then the training and the formation she got from people who had liberated themselves to such an extent that they were medical professionals, and then how she went beyond the medical profession with her building on her medical training, but then tapping into this mind understanding and this Africanization and this systems analysis. She used to say, there's a chessboard, and we're only playing on the right side of the chessboard. Many of us don't know there is a black side to the chessboard. And so we've got to begin to understand that the control over us is to keep us on the white side of the chessboard. We don't even know that there's a game to be played on the black side. Now, that's the African side. People say Black Lives Matter. There's a whole movement. You ask many of those people in Black Lives Matter, does African lives matter? It ain't got nothing to do with Africa. It's black lives. So that's your personal life. That's your life in America. It's not your life on the planet, because the life on the planet is an African consciousness that goes to the beginning of human development, that goes to its highest level of development that occurs not in slavery in America, but in building civilization and culture in Africa. And then when you have culture in Africa in the river valleys of the world, around the Sun Belt that African peoples participate in, you have to ask yourself, you have to put three things in place. Using that pyramidal formulation, that triangle that I use to try to teach, that first and foremost, when you look at that equilateral triangle, you have thesis, the beginning. And then you have antithesis, the opposite. Because in the universe, there is a consciousness of the law of opposites. There are laws that deal with the laws of opposites. But when you link the thesis, the beginning, with the antithesis, then you have to come to a synthesis. You have to pull those polarities and the information around those polarities together to come up with a synthesis. In order for us to even begin to understand where we need to go, what we need to do, we have to be synthesizers. Synthesizing the thesis that could be positive and synthesizing the antithesis, which could be negative, and then you take the positive and the negative and look at it and break it down and analyze it, and you come up with a synthesis. I tell my students, as you look at this knowledge and you go to the top of the pyramid, you go to the capstone, and you have to think in terms of caps. And what am I trying to say? This thesis, this antithesis, and this synthesis has to be looked at in terms of caps, C, for concepts. Break down knowledge in terms of what are the concepts involved. A, for analysis. Analyze the knowledge in various levels of understanding what really is real. And then P, for this knowledge is affected by forces, processes that are making this knowledge what it is. And then the concepts, the analysis, looking at the various views, the processes, the forces affecting knowledge, the economic, the political, the psychological, the spiritual, negative, positive forces that are affecting it. And then you have to put that all together in systems. Everything is interrelated. Systems is the interrelationship of things. So you can't just take one little thing that people say that they're waiting for the Jesus salvation and they're stuck there, and use that as an analysis on the full-blown process of black folk trying to survive in the house of North America, South America, and the Caribbean, and going through this process of dehumanization. It's amazing we've been able to come this far. So I'm not going to kick my grandfather in the butt and say that he was, because he thought the church could help him deliver something and the Masonic institution could help him deliver something, and then he was able to keep his land and his family together alongside that farm that my grandfather had. My grandfather on my father's side was his brother Sam. Both of them had two farms together. Both of them come out of virtual slavery. Sam was actually born in 1865. Slavery was just being ended. My grandfather was born in 1868, and they were giving us the 14th Amendment at that time. And then my grandmother was born in 1870, and that's when they put in the vote. So it looked like black folk helped to end slavery with the hundreds of thousands fighting in the Civil War, and they came up with a document and a proclamation and an amendment that said slavery was over. And then they wanted to give us the rights of citizens a couple of years later. And so in 1868, you had the 14th Amendment giving us citizens' rights, and then the vote came in 1870. But systems meant that the white system, once it got itself back together again and realized these powerful black factors in their system, they put us back into semi-slavery. The freedom that we thought we had ending slavery actually turned into a prison system process that began at the beginning of the end of slavery. They started putting us in these chain gangs and whatnot. And the so-called rights that we thought we had in the 14th Amendment to make us citizens, they actually reinterpreted their system in such a way that they gave the rights of my grandfather and my grandmother and their families and other black people, they gave the rights to the corporate structure. My grandfather was born in 1868, Jesse Jeffries. His family thought that this child had some rights, but in 1867, the system of white supremacy was taking another turn, and that's when Standard Oil of J.D. Rockefeller's empire was born. And the way the Supreme Court in the 1870s interpreted our rights was to deny us our rights and to give our rights of due process, privileges, immunities, equal protection of the laws, all of which were put into the 14th Amendment to make us full and whole. The Supreme Court, which was the Tawney Supreme Court that had ruled in the Dred Scott decision that black folks had no rights that white folks needed to respect, that court and took the civil rights of 1875 that looked as if they gave us some rights, and the court by the 1830s was interpreting our rights of due process, equal protection of the laws, and privileges and immunities of the laws. They gave those rights to the corporate structure, symbolized by Rockefeller, Standard Oil, J.P. Gould, Harriman, J.P. Morgan. All of these robber barons emerged after the Civil War when they were putting their railroads together and building industry because of the struggle around the Civil War. These corporate structures got the rights that were designated for us after we helped save the nation and end slavery. And then, so for 100 years, my grandfather and his people didn't get those rights. And then in the 1960s, we're struggling again to get the voting rights and trying to be whole in American society. So struggle is the key. But what am I going to say about that grandfather who was murdered by the Klan? Born August the 10th, 1868, after 50 years of trying to survive as a black man in a black family in a black community in America, when the new Klan rose in 1915 with the Birth of the Nation movie, lynchings were taking place, especially with the black soldiers coming back from World War I and wanting to fight back. And so my grandfather was murdered by the Klan July the 14th, 1917. 2 years later, you had the Red Summer of 1919, 25 so-called urban explosions, black folk fighting back, because many of these blacks had been in the war and they had been socialized to fight. And so when they came back, they wasn't going to sit down. They was going to raise hell, and they did. My grandfather becomes a victim of the birth of this new Klan. And he wasn't killed because he was winking at a white woman. He was killed because he was a leader of that community. He was killed because they organized themselves and built a schoolhouse on a hill that served generations of our people. They got a teacher from Atlanta, a Mr. Turner, to teach those children down in the Monticello area of Georgia. And generations of educated, aspiring black folks came out of that three-room schoolhouse, including the B&B hair people in Atlanta, the Browners, including Bishop Shai, including the Jeffries, including the Maddocks. All of those families operating as African clans built a survival network and a thriving network for them. They got their land. They got their resources. They took institutions like the Masonic institutions and made them serve them. The churches served them. The Daughters of Ruth served the women.
Right. Hold that thought right there, Doc. We got to take a quick break. And when we come back, we've got a bunch of folks who want to talk to you from all over the country. You too can join the discussion with Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Dr. J. Freeing Minds, right here on AM 1450 and FM 95.9 WOL, where information is power.
And now back to the Carl Nelson Show on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL Radio.
Thanks for staying with us, folks. Just want to remind you, coming up next week, Dr. B is going to be one of the guests that's going to be joining us, so keep it locked on AM 1450 and FM 95.9 WOL, where information is always power. And if you're out there in the DMV area, if it's not snowing where you are, it's going to be snowing later tonight, so be careful out there driving. 800-450-7876 to speak to Dr. J. Michael's calling us from Columbus. He's on line 5. Michael, you're on with Dr. Leonard Jeffries.
Thanks for taking my call. Powerful man. I'm like you. The thing is here, we have the knowledge, but as adults, our spirit has been broken. No different than a lion that you see in the zoo. He's no longer a lion. He waits for the white man, too, to feed him, to tell him how far he can go and run and when to sleep. We need to save our children. I like when you told that story about the school, because it's about our kids. As Frederick Douglass said, it's easier to repair him than a broken man and woman whose spirits. We have the knowledge, but we don't have the fight no more. Claude Anderson gives us the answers, but there's not a lot of children listening to him. I attend Power Talks. I don't see our kids getting that education. As I hear him say, black man, you're on your own, Carl says. We have to save our kids. We have to take them, pull them in, so they don't have to do what we're doing, whining about what we won't do. We know what they've done living in this lie. As I said to Carl, I sent my kids to the school. We all send them to this institution of lies.
I tell you what, Michael, do us a favor, put in a question for him so he can respond.
My question is, don't you think as adults, knowing what we know, Miss Francis, Frederick Douglass, Marcus Garvey, they're young. There's people out there just like them, but we have to encourage them. Do you think we should start instituting our own schools, our own churches, save our children, start by educating them and repair them from the lies we've been taught? Thank you.
All right. Dr. J?
Well, I appreciate, I think you said it was Brother Michael, and I appreciate his analysis and his commentary. And I don't know how young Brother Michael is, but the radio audience needs to know that in a couple of weeks, January the 19th to be in particular, I will be 80 years young.
Congratulations.
Four score, but I don't want no congratulations. I want support. I want support for us and others like myself, males and females around the world that need our people to support each other. And not to say, when we leave here that, they tried so hard to do what we need to do. We need to form a support system that allows us to continue the work. Now, the brother was saying that we need to work with the children. That's one part of it. We need to work with everybody. See, the African system included the living, the ancestors who are gone, and the yet to be born. That living included all of us. You are being educated until you leave here. And I don't have information as to whether you're being educated after you leave here, but you are being educated after you leave here. You're growing, you're learning. So we need to educate the whole African population, not just the children, because if the children are looking for education and the first source of education is their parents and significant others in their family, and we haven't moved them into an educational understanding, then they can't transmit it to the children. If you send them to the public schools or even your own schools, you're going to have to train the teachers. The whole community. The African socialization process involves from before the womb to after the tomb. In other words, when the women are being trained as young girls for the motherhood that they're going to be a part of, they're heavily educated about the values of life in their society. So when the child comes out of the womb, the child is being educated by somebody who is already on her educating path. But she's not expected to do it herself. If she is 20 years old or 19 years old, and she's produced a child, and that child is born into the African processing. All of the people in that extended family are the teachers of that child. The child does not only have a birth mother, if the young man that she marries has several brothers and several sisters, all of those sisters and brothers of his line are the child's parents. If the sister who had the baby herself has 5 sisters and 4 brothers, those 5 sisters and 4 brothers are the child's parents. If there are aunties and grandmothers in the context of that family, all of them have a responsibility for that child. This is where we've missed out. We've thought that education can be done in a school system that was anti-us. Education can be done by hostilely taking your children to integrate Little Rock High School, thousands of kids that hate your very presence and existence, and we're going to take 9 of them and school them to go into integrate Little Rock High School. That was heroic, but it was a misdirected consciousness, because we should have said, if you don't want us in your schools, then give us the same money that you're paying for your school so we can build our own. And so we integrate a few people in the schools and call it integration. That's not integration. That's a trick. That's a trick, because while you integrate a few in the white school system, they let the black school system, which was at least giving us survival education, you let it fall apart. So we have to understand we need to integrate, but the first integration is to integrate with yourself, integrate with your family, integrate with your community, integrate with you. We need to Africanize our lives, and that will give us the processes to deal with Trump and Negroness and all the other bedevilment that we have to face. Africanize our lives. That means that your family structure is not just a living, it's the ancestral realm, and it's not just for the children that are alive now. You have to prepare a process of education and socialization for the yet to be born.
Well, Doc, let me interrupt you for a second here. What about those brothers who are saying that they're Hebrew Israelites or they're Moors or they're not African, anything but African? How do we handle those?
They've been the victims of white supremacy just like all of us. And they got a little bit of something, and they're grabbing a hold of it. And so a log came by that's Hebrew Israelites, and they grabbed it. A log came by and you drowning now. And here comes a log, and you're gonna grab that and say, I got it, I'm safe. And here is somebody else done grabbed the Hebrew Israelites. Somebody else grabbed the evangelistic Christianity. Some of them done got Mormonism, etc. Now here comes the African mothership making its way through the waters. And you secure with that little log that you got. When for the future you need a ship, a mothership. And so I don't want to have nothing to do with Africa. Let the mothership go on by. I got my log. I'm happy with this. I can work with this. Not understanding that which you have is an aspect of the great African system that was put in place for the human family to survive on planet Earth. Controlling the economics and the politics and the culture of any society. Controlling the mind, body, and spirit of society. Africans put the mothership in place, and we are turning our backs on it. I don't have nothing to do with Africa. It's not a question of you're having nothing to do with it. You are African. If you were born and you're human on the planet, you are African. But Dr. J, that African, that comes out of the Romanness in that. We get a paralysis of analysis, and we miss the larger question. For whatever reason, the African emerged out of the human family and learned to live in this society with the negatives and the positives. Various other peoples came along and grabbed a piece of it and developed their institutions. Or in Chaldea, where Abraham was, so the narrative and the story goes, he left Chaldea as a remnant of families and came into the Nile Valley. And these people who call themselves the ancient Hebrews, following Abraham, the Abrahamic tradition, came in as desert folk with a survival system not in the full-blown development of economics and politics and culture of Africans who could build great monuments and temples with education systems and understand the movement of the heavenly bodies and develop their economic system to relate to the movement of the heavenly bodies and even understand what death might be or speculate on it and create institutions in reference to that. Abraham comes in with nothing, and then his multitudes leave after they've experienced the Nile Valley, and they got Judaism. But the mothership is the African culture. And out of the Judaism comes another manifestation, and it becomes a Jew who becomes Jesus. And then out of that engagement with the Nile Valley culture comes Christianity. And it is the way and nothing else. And then in comes the Greeks into the Nile Valley, coming out of the north. And they see the culture that has been developed by Africans of the Nile, and they tap into it. They create their schools of philosophy. They create architecture. They create writing. They create meaningful literature, all of which comes out of the African experience. And then they say, we got a Greek civilization. You have to be Greek to be anybody. And then the Romans follow them. You have to be Romans. And then we get into the AD, and then here comes other schools of knowledge developed out of this African tradition, and they call it Islam. But this is it. Everything else doesn't mean anything. This is it. Hey, you're able to take from the mothership and come up with a culture and institution that has helped you survive and others survive, and prove that you can take these traditions and move to higher heights of mathematics and science and philosophy. But you ain't got the whole thing. Greeks didn't have the whole thing. Abraham didn't have the whole thing. The concept of Jesus is not the whole thing. Crucified Savior is built into the African Valley thousands of years before there was a Jesus. Lawgivers, scientists were part of the African tradition thousands of years before there was somebody in Greece who was the father of medicine. Thousands of years before you had a single individual who was given the title of the father of medicine, Imhotep, but he got it from some other Africans. So I'm saying, as strong as I can, no matter what you think you got, if you can't Africanize it with the original people, with the mothers and fathers of humanity, who established great civilization culture for thousands of years, who created writing and philosophy, created moral laws and ethical understanding, who try to understand when one loses its physical life, there is a spiritual life that exists. Crucified Savior in the African tradition covers many thousands of years. Laws, 10 Commandments, the Africans institutionalized 42 that came out of the 160 that came out of the 600.
Tell you what, hold that thought right there, Doc, because we got to take a quick break. We're closing on the top of the hour. We got a bunch of folks who want to speak to. We'll take the calls next. Folks, you too can join the discussion. 800-450-7876. Speak to Dr. J. Reach out to us on AM 1450 and FM 95.9 WOL, where information is power.
Welcome to the Carl Nelson Show on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL Radio and live around the world on WOLDCnews.com.
Thanks for holding, folks. Our guest is Dr. Leonard Jeffries, 800-450-7876. You have a question for Dr. J. Let's go to line 6. Ahmed's calling us from Virginia. Ahmed, you're on with Dr. Leonard Jeffries.
Hello, Dr. J. Hi, Carl. Hey,
I'm fine, brother. How are you? That's for the new era. That's for the new era. Go ahead, bro.
Well, thank you, brother. Thank you. Hey, let me set the question up real quick. You know, I agree with 99% of what you're saying here, and the 1% ain't worth disputing. Now, I've got to say, we I agree, we have been brought up into this culture of Europeanism and white supremacy, even to the point that brothers and sisters, in fact, today even, a brother who's a reverend in the church, I witnessed him use white supremacy against another brother on the job by speaking in a way to bring, unwanted attention to another brother, trying to call him out, And so I believe that in addition to the beautiful truth and the information and knowledge you're bringing, what we've learned in this sick environment is that unacceptable behavior is appropriate, kind of like we're rewarded for it, and it's okay. Behavior that is disadvantaged, that puts us at a disadvantage. Like we don't set our own standards. So what do you think that we can do about setting up some expectations and about kind of really defining manhood? Because I think a lot of us, the men out here, have really forfeited their own manhood and they're content with just being little boys in a white man's industry and a white man's company and playing his little games. And many times when they go to college, really their dream is to aspire to just be a part of somebody else's company and kind of push things along. You understand what I'm saying? And playing these little games. And
all right, let's give him a chance to respond. Thanks, Ahmed.
Well,
Dr. J.
Carl, you can't have people calling in sincerely, expressing some wishes, and then before they get warmed up, you just throw them under the bus and using me as the excuse. And so
I know, I apologize, but the folks are holding, they're getting on my butt because they've been holding a long time, Doc. That's the problem, though.
Well, the thing is...
So if you can shorten up on the answers, I'd appreciate it.
No, but see, you have to have me on more. You can't just call me once a month and say, Dr. J, can you come on to deal with economics? You have to have me interrelating with your audience. And I'm telling the audience, and I do it every time, but only a handful of them call, that I can't do what I need to do on a radio program. I can't do what I need to do in a lecture. I can only show you a window on the world that you've got to become a part of. And then we got to figure out how to get into that world. So this is not just to tease you, but it's to engage you. I want to be a part of the brother who just got on and others. I want to be a part of what you're doing. So call my home number, which is 201-837-1355. Let me say it again. The home number is 201-837-1355. If that does not allow you to get me, then call my cell, 201-668-7973. Again, 201-668-7973. Now, I've done this several times. Only a handful of you call, which is good, because we can spend a couple hours dealing with each other. This is just to show you what needs to be done. This is not the answer. This is let you know that there are systems that you got to tap into to change your world, and there are systems already existing that will devastate your world. So that I'm just beating you up, Carl, with a lot of love and affection. You're one of the strongest out there, and I appreciate you allowing me to be able to express myself. This is my 80th year. I want to be able to put out the experience that I've had dealing with all of this legacy of the Dr. Beds and the Dr. Clarks, the Dr. Diep, the Francis Cress Welsing, and my partners now, Dr. Wade Nobles, Dr. Naeem Akbar, Professor Smalls, and the sisters. My wife is all the time on a breakthrough in terms of understanding. So we need to connect. And so I'm telling folks who may be hesitant, you can call and cuss me out, but make it short. And then let's get on to something serious. And so, I've been around too long not to want to be able to reach out for our people, because we're what we've been looking for. And we have to be resurrected into a new consciousness and lay a foundations for a new world that's taking place. And I've been blessed to have another level of understanding and consciousness, and I want to be able to share it with our folks. Now, where are we, Carl? Give me your question.
My question, we'll go to the next caller because they've got the questions for you. Okay. Clay's calling from DC's on line 3. Clay, your question for Dr. J.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Yeah, I'd like to. What I want to know, Carl, is that everyone's talking about Black Lives Matter, and who does it matter to? Because if you look at the statistics in Chicago, all the major cities, most of the homicides are black, and just like Chicago, 768 murders. So who does the Black Lives matter to?
All right, that's a good question, Dr. J.
Well, I don't know what his question was, but he's suffering from what I call a paralysis of analysis. He's dealing with an issue and a symptom of what is happening, but he's not going deep. And so I need that brother to call me so we can talk. And I can't do it on the program now, but the process of taking a black community in Chicago, which is 1 million plus people, and then relegating it to gangs that are killing each other and killing others, you fail to understand how we got into this situation in the first place. We don't organize our community in gangs. We organize them into brotherhoods and sisterhoods, and we transfer values to them in the context of a brotherhood and a sisterhood. Gangs come out of COINTELPRO and other institutions that were put in our communities and encouraged to be in our communities so that drugs could be dumped into our communities and we could have the chaos that we now have. But you can't take a whole community of 1 million plus people and just relegating them to some deaths that are created in the main by gangs killing each other over drugs and turf. We can't let you do that. We came up out of slavery in Mississippi and Alabama and Arkansas and made our way to Chicago looking for the promised land. And then we found that it was not the promised land, as King found out when he was marching down south where he could be civilly protested against. But when he got up to Chicago and he went into those Chicago suburbs like Cicero, he saw real hate and death. And he was in the fear of his life. And I'm sure he was praying 1,000 times for Jesus to save him when he saw real white hate coming out of the northern cities that I grew up in. So you can't dismiss our people because there's death and destruction. Drugs were dumped in our community purposely. People were allowed to form gangs and create turf wars in our community. They're doing that same thing in Africa, allowing army groups to come in and then creating a war of destruction. Then they take the wealth out. So we got to go deep in this thing. And I'm not the brother expressed himself, and I'm glad he expressed it, but I'd like to engage him so I can just let him know that you have to see what the system of white supremacy does. And no matter how many deaths occurred in Chicago last year, when you go back to World War I, when the European was fighting the European, you're talking about tens of millions of people slaughtered by the Europeans. You're talking about mustard gas and other poisons, Europeans putting it on Europeans. And then you had the after World War I and the hundreds of millions that were injured and maimed. Then you come into the Depression where the European system had completely collapsed. And he was selling apples and whatnot to survive. And then before you know it, here comes World War II, where millions of Europeans are killing each other, not just the 6 million that Hitler might have put into gas chambers and ovens in reference to the Jewish population. There were tens of millions of Europeans murdered, white-on-white crime. No comparable thing is happening in Chicago. So why do we victimize ourselves and we don't have a view of history? You're talking about a system that's going into another phase of devilishness. We don't know what this Trump represents, but we know it ain't nothing good for us. So we better be ready and get our communities organized and start saving our money so we can deal with the economic. Stop buying in this damn system. Save your money so you can use it for important things that may come up, because they're going to withdraw resources from what you think you have, trying to survive as Negroes in America.
All right,
so
800
the question.
800-450-7876. Dee's calling us from Baltimore. Dee, you have a question for Dr. J?
Yes, good afternoon, Carl, and good afternoon to Dr. Jeffrey. Carl,
yes,
you need to have him on probably once a week, and you can take off.
Tell Carl that. Y'all need to call in and say, Carl.
You have on entertainment purposes. You need to have on.
No, but brother, that's a good question. We can't do that. Carl, I'm not standing alone. There's a partnership of us that have grown up together. When he mentions Claude Anderson, that's a partner. D.Gregory, that's a big brother. Francis Cress Welsing, Naeem Akbar, Wade Nobles, and Naeem were brothers in the struggles. And my wife and others, these sisters who stood by us. So it's not just Jeffrey. There's a whole host of us that are trying to create this consciousness, which is what we refer to as Africanizing. It's not wearing some jewelry or wearing a kufi like I wear. The value systems.
Right. Hold that thought right there, Doc. We got to take our last look at the traffic and weather because it's going to start snowing in the DMV later tonight. It's already started slowly in some areas. 800-450-7876. Speak to Dr. J. We'll take your calls next on AM 1450 and FM 95.9 WOL, where information is power.
The Carl Nelson Show on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL Radio.
And thank you for staying with us. One of our guests is Dr. Leonard Jeffries, one of our griots in our community. Whenever you hear he's in your city, because there's a lot of stuff in New York. I know you've got something up in there in New York. I need you to inform us with us before you leave. Go and see these guys. That's all I can tell you. D in Baltimore. D, your question for Dr. J.
Yes, Carl, just to continue on, I just want to make a quick comment that I didn't really hear about Dr. Jeffries or Amos Wilson until my mid to late 30s. And it's actually a shameful event that was the case, but it was. But my question was, Dr. Jeffries, is I know we talk about Marcus Garvey, and I've studied him a little, but not in detail. Just wanted to know if you could talk about how he was able to organize and fundraise even back in the early 1900s, and how we make it use that today.
A very good question. I'm glad the brother raised it. And again, let me tell our audience, if you want to connect with me, just call me, and we'll have a discussion. Brother raised a very important question about Marcus Garvey. I've been calling to find out whether it is true. I learned from a partner in Philadelphia that President Obama has given a full pardon to Marcus Garvey. I called down to Washington to try to connect with others to see whether this is true. I know we had been hoping that it would be, and there were petitions filed and there were other intercessions taking place. I hope this is the case. Marcus Garvey was important. We need to study him. He comes up from the hills of Jamaica in the Montego Bay area. And he was inspired to do something for his people. He went to Costa Rica and he saw his people weren't doing all that they should do. And then he heard about Booker T. Washington and that he was trying to pull self-development together for black people. And so he wanted to come to America to meet this particular individual, Booker T. Washington. And eventually he got to America, but Booker T. Washington had died or was killed. But Booker T. Washington made it possible for Marcus Garvey to come into America because he blocked the Immigration Act that was being put in place by the U.S. Congress to prevent black folk from migrating, and particularly black folk from the Caribbean and South America, many of whom had a right to migrate because they helped to build the Panama Canal. But legislation was passed, and Booker T. Washington used his Tuskegee machine, which had political dimensions, to knock the legislation out. And as a result, Marcus Garvey was able to come to America. America's not Costa Rica. America's not an island in the Caribbean. America is a world. And at the heart of that world was this enormous black community, and Marcus Garvey tapped into it. The community wasn't sitting there waiting for him. The community was mobilized. It was organized. I said in 1919, you had 25 urban rebellions. The blacks were organized in their Masonic orders and in their fraternities, in their sororities, and in their churches, and their institutions, and in their businesses. Marcus Garvey put a cap on it to say, let's make this a universal Negro improvement, not just a Birmingham improvement or a Chicago improvement or a Nashville improvement. So he gave a global perspective to the African community that was ready to move. And it did move. But then you had the Depression and other things that put a block on it. But then in the 40s and 50s, we started to move again. And the spirit of Marcus Garvey was complemented with the spirit of Honorable Elijah Muhammad, with the spirit of the NAACP, with the spirit of our women's groups. And so we have to see each other as part of a global African family, the objective of which is to find links for this global African family, and not just limited to an organization such as the UNIA. Some friends of ours now are trying to revise the UNIA. And if this is true that Obama has taken that symbolic mark that was placed on him by J. Edgar Hoover and others off of him, then that will be a reason for us to say hallelujah and to link up with the Garvey tradition, which has us seeing each other wherever we are as family. So my personal circumstance is that my socialization coming up out of Virginia involved Booker T. Washington, because they were farmers. And they knew that you're supposed to put your buckets down where you are and control your land and be productive. But also W.E.B. Du Bois did a study of Farmville, Virginia. So W.E.B. Du Bois is a part of my family socialization. And then, of course, Garvey came in the 20s with his movement. So my grandfather, who was born on January the 19th, 1888, I was born on January the 19th, 1937. My mother's father and my mother, they came up from the South with their families. They were Booker T. Washingtonites, W.E.B. Du Boisites, and Marcus Garveyites. That's the pablum that my brother and I, Marlon Jeffries, martial artist supreme, that's the pablum that we grew up with. But it wasn't just us. Of the 100 kids I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, 90 of us made it, and many of us made it big because even though we lived amongst white folks, we created an African village. That's why I'm saying Africanize our lives. That just doesn't mean taking on a tradition of Africa or a particular institution of Africa, but to see that you are the parent people of the universe. You don't sit and wait for anybody to tell you what to do. The Garden of Eden is the continent of Africa. It's not a little place where there was a snake in there doing some mess with Adam, and then there was an Eve. The African continent is the garden from which the human family sprung, and they had to deal with the laws of the universe, and that's what I'm saying. Africanize our lives. I'm not saying we're a kufi or an African robe like I do, but put the value system of African peoples, which is what I call the 3 C's: communal, using that pyramidal triangular shape again. Communal, you live together, and cooperative, you work together, and collective, you share together. That is the classic African value system of African peoples, whether they're in small villages or whether they're in massive civilizations like the civilizations of Egypt or the Sudan, or civilization developed among the Yoruba people or the Antebellum people in Southern Africa. We need to look at what our people did in response to trying to show that African lives matter. We responded by trying to build a higher level of culture and civilization. That doesn't mean that we're going to poo-poo somebody who's got a religious tradition in terms of Christianity, a religious tradition in terms of Judaism, a religious tradition in terms of Islam. The problem is when they're told that this is the only tradition, this is God only spoke to this particular person, and there's only a salvation in this direction. No, there are going to be multiple ways to get to where we need to go, and some people who have something that's allowing them to come up out of the muck and mire and to be able to see the light, they can hang on to it, but they better see that it's a part of a larger process, and the systems of white supremacy are not getting weaker, they're getting stronger. They're pulling in honorary whites to join them, so the Chinese are considered honorary white in the system of white supremacy. The Indians of India are considered honorary white in the system of white supremacy. When the oil question in the 1970s became a big thing, the Arabs became honorary whites in the system of white supremacy, and all of them are unified in one big agreement that we may fight with each other and conflict with each other. But one thing is certain, we will collectively agree to keep the African at the bottom so we can exploit him to the max and control the African mind, M-I-N-D, so you can control the African mind, M-I-N-E. Africa is the richest part of this globe called Earth, and all of these honorary whites, in conjunction with the system of white supremacy, are in agreement to super exploit the African continent and never let Africans raise their head up to be able to develop themselves the way the Creator has chosen them to develop. So this is deep. We have to give Carl Nelson his due, inviting us all to come to a power talk in Washington. And you had all my friends and buddies. Our great Francis Cress-Welsing had a partner, and that was Segmet, Dr. Pat Newton, and they worked together. And Tony Browder has worked close with Dr. Ben and in the tradition of Dr. Asa Hilliard. And Carl had us all there. Claude Anderson was there, and others. And Francis Cress-Welsing's sister was there to receive an award for Francis. And Francis, Dr. Francis Cress. And, of course, my partner for life. I love him, but more, I love his partner, our sister, Queen Mother, Lil, D.Gregory, and the Gregory children. I was just with them honoring Mark Mazzamella, Mark Thompson, and his 50th birthday. It's about family. And the family is not the European model of the mother, father, and the child, and a dog called Spots, and a picket fence. The family is learning to live together as a collectivity, learning to live together and sharing space and place and making it sacred, learning to build together, working together cooperatively, not against each other, but with each other, and learning to share. That's the 3C value system that we have to put in place no matter where we are if it's going to really make a difference of Africans standing up against the system of white supremacy with the honorary whites, the Chinese, the Asians, the Indians of all stripes who are in Africa to super exploit it and not to build it. We have to provide that understanding so Africans say, yes, we'll take your aid, but we don't intend for you to be here forever.
All right. Hold that thought right there, Doc, because we got to take another break. There's some real talk right there. 800-450-7876. You too can join the discussion with Dr. J. Take your calls next on AM 1450 and FM 95.9. WOL, where information is power.
To the Carl Nelson Show on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL Radio.
And thanks for rolling with us and our guest, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, one of our elders, our scholars in our community. 800-450-7876. You go to line 6. Jalil is calling from PG County. Jalil, you have a question for Dr. J.
Yes, greetings, Hotep Abadigani, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. This is Brother Jalil from African First World Alliance, 145th Street at Convent. I was one of your students, you and Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark, in 1985, 1986.
I'm certainly glad that you joined the family, and let's maintain contact because we've got to pass.
Yes, sir. I heard the communication. I have your number. But I believe what the folks are needing in the Delmarva area, they need another First World Alliance, about similar to Dr. Keffer and Dr. Brother Bill, when you were teaching, you and Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark, when I first met you in 84, 85, 86. They are desperately in need of an institution like First World Alliance in Harlem. I gained everything you're talking about. We know that institution, that model, many of us, those that are in the children of the 60s, we have got that model, and we've gotten your blessings and mission statement. And I think very strongly that the community here has to have all the things you talked about, but we need institutions to support our heroes or heroines like yourself. And I want to let you know that I am the man today and taking care of my family and being the culture nationalist I am because of the time and the sacrifice that you took at First World Alliance, at the lectures from Hunter College our African Echoes with Dr. Ben, everything. So I honor you because I spent those 6-7 years there being tutelaged by you is where I first met Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. So in the 80s at First World Alliance was my moment of 1964, 1968 Black Power movement. So for us, those of the 8 children of the 60s, we got it in the 80s. Some of us got it, and we need to continue. So I'm going to give you a call, and I want to bring you on down here to the area. And that is something I think, if you can mention, but that seed for those of us who participated with your teachings, and Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, is where I met Dr. Malana Karinga, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, all our greats from Ipe, Haki, all of them. We need to continue that model and message. So, Asante Santa, I will be calling you.
All right. Thanks, Delio. Dr. J, you want to respond to anything he said?
Yes, certainly. I appreciate the brother bringing his personal understanding of the change that can take place. And so that was a great revelation to us. And that's where we're going. My wife and I have set up a foundation to deal with education, and we're working with legacy. And the legacy not just of the Jeffries, but the legacy of Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark, the legacy of Dr. Diop from Africa, the legacy of Dr. Asa Hilliard and Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, et cetera. So he was right to point out that there was an explosion of this information in the 60s, and it got deep into the 70s when we established the Black Studies programs all across the nation, hundreds of them. And then in the 80s, Dr. Ben said, well, you can take and claim African history, but if you don't claim the Nile, you're missing your power equation. And so we moved the explosion of African studies into the Nile Valley. And within a couple of years, after Malana Karinga and Jacob Carruthers co-sponsored a conference in Chicago, we organized the ASCAC, the Association for Study of Classical African Civilizations, the next year in 1985 in Chicago. Then 86, they met in New York. And that's when I suggested that we continue this explosion in organization, but we go to the Nile Valley collectively. And in 87, we took 1,000 people on a pilgrimage to the Nile Valley. And it included 3 generations of the Jeffries, my wife and I, my mother, and then our nephew, Hassan Jeffries and Hakeem Jeffries, who is now the congressman, went as 12 and 14-year-old with Asa Hilliard's children, with Jacob Carruthers' daughter, with so we went as a family with generations. That's the type of thing. Now, the brother's saying we need a First World Alliance, but let's study it. What did it do? It transmitted information to our communities. But what didn't it do? It focused on the adults and didn't focus on the teenagers, didn't focus on the babies, didn't focus on the families, didn't focus on reaching out of our communities overseas. So we need another First World Alliance movement to put the education in the community, but we have to expand it and not limit it. One of the commitments my wife and I have with others is to put in place what we had in the 70s, in the 80s, and 90s, the community, putting African education in the community. And that came out of some of our family members in Chicago that were talking about the community. Once the big attack came on me, the biggest attack in the history of the world against a professor in modern times, or any times, because they had modern technology to try to destroy me, but they did not. They did not, because I'm standing on this truth. It's not my truth. It's the universal truth. And so we were attempting to put the universal truth in the public education system, and they said, no, we're not going to put Nile Valley civilization here. We're not going to put the debt owed by the Greeks to the Africans. We're not going to put that Africans began the march of humankind millions of years ago before anybody had thought this should be or would be a European or an Asian. So that, if we can't put it in the institutional structures of white supremacy, which is understandable, we need to put it in our communities, in our homes, in our churches, as much as our churches will allow it to be, and in our community organizations, et cetera. So the brother is right. That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying Africanize our lives. But let's learn. We started from the universities down. We started from community education in the community for adults. We never reached down into the public school system or into the community centers or into the playing fields, basketball or football. We kept it as an adult process, which helped to raise adults to consciousness, but it wasn't a complete process. As the Africans have in their tradition of socialization from before the womb till after the tomb. So you even appreciate the work of your ancestors. That grandfather that I always raised, never knew him. My father was the last of the 13 kids. My father never knew his father because he was murdered when my father was 2 or 3 years old. But the blood of that brother is in me. And those people, his brother, and those who stood and to a testimony of the ability of the African to adjust to the system of white supremacy, even if it has to be in a church with a white Jesus there, even if it has to be in a Masonic institution that did not reveal the truth of all these societies of secrets come directly out of the Nile, because you need manhood societies and womanhood societies in order to pass the real knowledge down and make a commitment to real development. So what the white folks may have passed down to black folks in the form of white masonry and white fraternities and sororities and white religious institutions, all we have to do is Africanize all of them, because they all come out of our traditions. Crucified Savior, African tradition. Resurrection and rebirth, which the George Washington Monument represents, is African tradition. Pillared Temple that they have Lincoln sitting in on the mall like a pharaoh. Pillared Temple comes directly out of the African tradition. And Dr. Asa Heed and Jacob Carruthers and Tony Brown and the rest of them, and now our great student who have become leaders at Howard University and whatnot, head of our organizations. All of this truth is now emerging, and it needs to be put into a cultural package that can be with our women and the families raising our children, can be in the community centers. And if we can't walk it into the schools, we'll have Saturday schools where we'll teach it, or after school programs. So this is my 80th year, and having had the experience that I had, I want to get it out there to say, just as that brother said, he learned as an adult. We need to put this into the whole culture. So we're teaching not only the children, but the yet to be born. We're preparing for them before they get here. And we're not just doing it for ourselves, we're doing it for the shoulders, the ancestors' shoulders that we stand on. Those ancestors that we disparaged because they had a white, blonde, blue-eyed Jesus that was speaking to their heart, that was survival culture that allowed them to keep another day in their lives so that they could pass their seed on to us. I'm grateful for every Negro who knew how to survive the plantation system and knew how to stay alive long enough to plant that seed. So I would be available, and others would be available. So we can't just dismiss our people that they had a white, blonde, blue-eyed Jesus. That allowed them to survive. Or they were on the plantations, and they all should have jumped up and slit the throat of the plantation owners. That could have happened. It did happen in Haiti. And the Europeans are so vengeful of the Bouleka Coupitet, that was part of Dessalines, the great leader of Haiti, burned the plantations down, and 1,300 of them were burned, and cut off the heads of the plantation owners, and put in a constitution that is a real constitution of freedom and democracy, and declare that Haiti will never be a place where slave owners will be able to rule. And the white system that emerged with the American Revolution and the French Revolution and the new nations and the new capitalism, that white system is still making Haitians and other black people who rise up pay. And so we have to understand our history. Thank God for the Haitian Revolution. Thank God for Marcus. Thank God for Booker T. Washington. Whatever timing he did, so-called allowed him to put in place a consciousness that allowed institution building to take place. Thank God for my grandfather, who was a Mason. Wow. The twin pillars of masonry were on his tombstone, the tallest tombstone in the graveyard in Kelly, Georgia. And it was the symbol of what? The symbol of Tekken, the symbol of resurrection and rebirth.
Right. Hold that thought right there, Doc. We got to take our last break. 800-450-7876. Dr. J is on fire. Folks, we'll take your calls next on AM 1450 and FM 95.9 WOL, where information is power.
Back to the Carl Nelson Show on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL Radio.
Thanks for staying with us, folks. Our guest is Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Just to remind you, some of the folks who stopped by this week: Tony Browder, Dr. Claude Anderson, D.Gregory was here, Reverend Jesse Jackson stopped by. Also, Chairman Fred Hampton Jr., the son of Fred Hampton Sr., who died with Mark Clark in that shooting. I wouldn't call it a shootout, but a shooting, if you will, in Chicago with the law enforcement affiliates from Illinois trying to crush the Panthers. 800-450-7876. So tell your friends to keep it locked. We got the best guest coming right here on AM 1450 and FM 95.9. Gwendolyn's been holding for a while. She's calling us from Jackson, Mississippi. She's on line 3. Gwendolyn, you have a question for Dr. J?
Yes, I do have a question for my honorable Dr. J. Thank you, Carl. Dr. J, I'm only alive because you and the First World family, Wade Nobles in Oakland, have saved my life. Nigel Lawrence in Dominica. You know me when you see me, and I will call you off the line. What I need you to do, and this was fabulous beyond my belief. Dr. J, I'm from Passaic, so I do thank you and Congressman Payne and all of y'all that saved the poor black people's lives over there. But what I need you to speak on today is what you all taught me about African spiritual power. No one understood, not many understood, when Dr. Welsing said, do not send cards, do not send flowers. We need money to continue this work. She closed down Washington, D.C. for 4 days. She was saying, do not fly in, do not stay in hotels. That place had not seen snow like that on the day of her memorial for 4 days straight. Not since 1922 had Washington, D.C. been shut down. Even New York City was shut down. I need our folks to understand this is the type of African spiritual power that we all must have. But if we don't do the work while we're here, we're not going to have it when we leave. I'm headed to Zambia to live. I will call you off the air. I do owe you all my money and all my organs because y'all have really saved my life and given me a life. So I thank you today for this, too. So my question is, please explain African spiritual power to our people in the context of Dr. Welsing shutting down Washington, D.C. And I did write a tribute to it, and I will get you a copy of the tribute, and I will also get you, Carl Nelson, a copy of that tribute. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, Gwendolyn. Dr. J?
Well, we should call it quits after that. That's we can't go much further than that. She reached all around and even into the Caribbean, into Dominica. My major partner in building the largest Black Studies program in history was Professor Edward Scobie from Dominica. And my nephew's wife is getting her education from the Ross Medical School in Dominica. So she touched a heavy nerve of African spirituality there. Now, the person who can deliver the message that we need, and he may not be able to do it on the radio, but I guess if anybody can deliver it on the radio, it's Professor James Small. I've known him for 40 more years, and he has been attempting to deal with African spirituality like no other brother or sister I have met. And he's moved around the world and dealing with it. So we need to have him on. But we don't need him telling all that he needs to tell. You do not need it on these airwaves. There are people that are listening to us, and they're already preparing the antidote to our African cure, meaning Africanizing ourselves, so that we need to put the messages out there, but we need the type of relationship where we can be face-to-face and the type of relationships where people will not be able to just out and out knock us down before we get started. The pyramid of power that I want to leave with the family is that put that triangle shape together again, the equilateral triangle, and then at one polarity you have economics, Economics is the most important thing in the universe. Economics is your creative, productive capability. Africans understood that going back through the millennia, and they developed various economic formations that laid the foundation for the human family to survive. But your economics really can't grow and develop and can't be yours unless there is politics. Politics is the capability to manage and administer. Politics is not what politicians do in Washington or in the White House. Politics is what you do to manage your life and your community and your resources. So once we put that foundation of an African economic and political process in place where we produce and we control and manage the production and administer it properly, then we'll be on our way. That's the foundation. The foundation of everything is economics and politics. The most minute cell of your body, the subatomic part of your body, the subcells have to have an economic, productive, creative potential. Otherwise, they die, and they have to be properly managed. Otherwise, they can't do what they're supposed to do. And the key to the management of the minute cells, I call that the internal understanding, and the external understanding is reaching out to the universe. Even that universe has to have its economic dimension and its management dimension, the politics. And the key is culture. So at one polarity, you have economics, that's your creative, productive capability. At the other polarity, you have politics, that's your management capability. And we can't let white folks take care of our economics and think that we're going to have something. We can't let white political systems take care of our politics and think that it's going to be done in our name. Culture tells us to do your own. Culture tells you to develop high culture and even, if necessary, survival culture. But culture are the values, the beliefs. And we can't have the image of the creator, a white, blonde, blue-eyed creator. That's for somebody else. We can't have the image of evil, being a devil with a pitchfork. That's somebody else. We can't have the symbol of benevolence and graciousness and generosity being some white man coming down the chimney, ho-ho-hoing with a white beard and a bag of tricks on his back and a sleigh. And so we have to control the images. Whoever controls the images controls the self-esteem, what you think about yourself. Now, this is another pyramid. Self-esteem comes when you control your images. Self-respect comes when you translate what your images mean. And self-esteem and self-respect lead to self-development. And that's what we have to put in our culture and in our educational system at all of the levels, including the ancestral level. And that's when we get into the spiritual realm. That we are not, my grandfather, both sides, my mother's father, I'm born on his birthday. Hey, ain't just an accident. That's in the cards. My father's father, when I was with Alex Haley and working on the Roots Project, and when the white folks down in Georgia were filming Roots, and they told me that Dr. Jeffries, we're here, we're glad you you are dealing with African history and you're helping us out. But we want you to know we bought the rights to the book Roots, and we're certainly under no obligation to deal with the truth of it, and we don't have to deal with the truth of African history and culture. These were white producers, one from England, Green, and the other Margolis, who was handling the Roots filming. They just told me out and out that no matter what you think you're doing in terms of advising us, it's insignificant because we bought it. We own it. I was thrown off my psychic center. I couldn't fall back to no PhD from Columbia, one of the first to deal with African studies, no master's from Columbia, one of the first to get a master's essay, no honors graduate, a certificate from Europe when I studied in French, or graduating from Lafayette College. None of that could put me back on my psychic center. And so when the sisters talk about spirituality, I know what she means, because spirit spoke to me when I was devastated and I had to decide whether to leave Alex Haley here or just to keep walking around like a zombie. And spirit said, go to your grandfather's grave. I said, what grandfather? I ain't no grandfather here in Georgia. And I called up to Aunt Bessie and said, Aunt Bessie, tell me where we come from. She said, we come from Akron, Ohio. I said, Aunt Bessie, ain't nobody come from Akron. We came out of Georgia. Where is your father? Where is my grandfather? And she finally got my drift, and she said, My father, your grandfather, is buried in Midway Church Cemetery, Jasper County, Kelly, Georgia. And finally, after Lou Gossett and myself and others were discussing what was happening on the Root set, I just said I got to leave for my own psychic benefit. And Spirit told me to go to the grandfather's grave. I went to the Savannah Archives, and there coming up out of the page was my grandfather, somebody I had never even known, nobody had ever talked about. There he was on the written page. I said, I'm going to meet him in the graveyard. And I flew to Atlanta and then rented a car and went down to Monticello and then got to Kelly and went into the graveyard. There was the school that they had built on the hill. There was the church that they had where they were worshiping, and there was the graveyard. And I had the courage to go into that graveyard, turning on the lights of the car, nervous and scared, worried about snakes, a city boy in the rural areas, too dumb to know that snakes wasn't the problem, ticks was the problem. But I got into that cemetery, and there was his tombstone up to my chest, the tallest tombstone in the graveyard. And it had his vital statistic. Jesse Jeffries, born August the 10th, 1868, in the same week of Marcus Garvey, but a few years, 10 years, so years before Marcus, 20 years before Marcus Garvey. And there was his death. He died July 14th, 1917. In the period of awakening that black folks were all about. He had 50 years. In those 50 years, he took care of 13 of his own kids with my grandfather and 7 of her sister's kids. And next to his farm was his brother, Sam, who had 15 kids. They were able to survive in that red clay of Georgia, have their own farms, build their own houses, build their own schools, control their land, and control the socialization process that had him as the leader of the Masonic group. And they had a similar group for the women, the Daughters of Ruth. Out of that red clay of Georgia came the foundation that allowed them to last and survive until they could pass it down to me. And I hope that we will understand that continuity. The best thing that happened to me was to go back, to go with Alex Haley, and then to go back into that Georgia red clay and then get the spirit. That's the spirituality that the sister's talking about. That was designed by the Creator himself and those spirit forces operating around the Creator. And since that time, in 1977, I have vowed that I will fight to the death to bring this African truth and the truth of African peoples to our peoples, because you can not only speak truth to power, as we are good at cussing out white folks, but you have to have a process of speaking truth to empower your people, putting the power in their hands. And you start with the children, and you go through every age group, and you continue on with the ancestors. Frances Cress Welsing will be speaking to us. Dr. Frances, Queen Mother Frances, will be speaking to us. No matter how many eons of time pass, her presence will be meaningful to us. And that's what we got to understand. There ain't no spookism. It's just the spiritual connection that has linked us to the Creator. And it comes in different forms and packages. And some people get it and say, this is the way, and there ain't no other way. And if you think about another way, you're going to die a vicious death in the hellfires. But there is various ways and various paths to this understanding of the link between economics, politics, and culture. We're on a victorious path, brothers and sisters. You can sit there and say, oh, what are we going to do with Trump? You ain't going to worry about no Trump.
Doc,
you're going to deal with Africanize your lives, and then that's what the process of our growth and development is all about. Yes.
We got to run. Thank you. Folks, if you need the number, just call the station. We have it for you, but we're way out of time. Dr. J. Stay strong, stay positive, stay in the light. See you tomorrow at 4 o'clock right here on AM 1450 and FM 95.9 WOL, where information is power.